Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman. This week, Paul Downs makes two seemingly contradictory points. One is that his business is on track to have its best year ever. The other is that he expects to claim another big government subsidy, courtesy of the Enhanced Employee Retention Tax Credit. As Paul says, if you don't know about the ERTC, or if you don't know that its requirements have been relaxed, you probably should check it out. Meanwhile, Jay Goltz tells us what happened when three of his employees found out what the others were being paid. And Dana White feels a little deflated after talking to an investment banker. Plus, Paul shares his new strategy for coping with the labor shortage. Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations will let owners know they are not alone in facing challenges. Same thing with our daily newsletter, the 21 Hats Morning Report, which highlights the most important news of the day for business owners and which you can subscribe to at 21hats.com, where you can also find transcripts of our podcast episodes and lots of other articles and interviews. Joining me this week on the podcast are regulars Paul Downs, who is CEO of Paul Downs Cabinet Makers, which makes custom conference tables outside of Philadelphia, Jay Goltz, whose companies in Chicago include a picture frame business, artist frame service, and a home furnishing store, Jason Home, and Dana White, who is CEO of Paralee Boyd, a chain of hair salons based in Detroit. The episode is titled, It's a Pile of Money. Welcome, Paul, Jay, and Dana. Great to have you all here. Let's start with you, Paul. We haven't seen you in a little while. How's business?
Business is pretty good. We have suffered through a number of staff vacations, and one guy was out while his wife had a baby, and that turned into a couple of extra weeks as there were some complications, which is all resolved. We're back up and running full capacity, made a couple of hires, and things look good.
That's good to hear. You told me when we talked the other day that you have something cooking with the Employee Retention Tax Credit?
Yes. The Employee Retention Tax Credit was originally rolled out at the same time as the PPP and was intended to, as far as I can understand, to provide support for employers who did not lay off employees when times were hard or had been shut down by the government. It's a credit against your 941 obligations when you pay payroll, the employer's portion of the payroll tax. And it's actually a pretty amazing subsidy because they've expanded the eligibility well beyond last year, and now it's available for every quarter of 2021. The summary is that if you have a business that was either shut down by government action or experienced a drop in revenue compared to 2019 for any of the quarters in 2021, you can claim a credit of up to $7,000 per employee for each quarter that you qualify. It seems like a lot of people, including us, would qualify for this subsidy, and it's just another big pile of cash from the government. So it looks like we're going to qualify for 2 quarters this year, and it should amount to about another $300,000 in credit. Now, unlike the PPP loan, this is a credit against your tax obligation, so it would tend to increase your profits, and you would be taxed on the increased profits. But you're not going to lose money by claiming this credit if you qualify. And I would encourage anybody who thought that all the goodies had already been handed out to take a careful look at this and see whether your company qualifies, because it's a pile of money.
So you're going to be able to take this for the first 2 quarters of this year?
It looks like we're going to qualify for the second quarter and probably for the fourth quarter based on our accrued revenues.
You had told us previously that you were on your way to I think you said your best year ever. Why would you think that your fourth quarter would be below 2019's fourth quarter?
Because our fourth quarter in 2019 was the best quarter we've ever had. So in order to have a 20% drop on that quarter-to-quarter comparison, we can still book a pretty reasonable amount of income and qualify for the credit.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. And Uncle Sam, after my entire life of being very stingy to small business owners, has suddenly unleashed these piles of cash. And
well, not out of nowhere. I mean, there was a pandemic.
There was a pandemic, but the qualification process is mathematical. Like take a look at what your revenues were for each quarter of 2019 and compare them to each quarter of 2020. And depending on what happens, you may well qualify for this subsidy. I mean, for us, it's going to be about $300,000 for the 2 quarters.
Where do you find more information about this?
There's various IRS publications that explain it in the IRS way, which is incomprehensible. I found a pretty succinct explanation, which I can email to Lauren to put in the show notes. And it's called the Employee Retention Tax Credit. It's a program that's been changed twice since it was rolled out in March of 2020. And basically, the last change, they expanded it so that it's available for all 4 quarters of 2021. And that's a real blessing for anybody who's had revenue go down.
Paul, I think there was initially a rule that said you can't do this and the PPP loan simultaneously for the same employees in the same period. I think that was later changed. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about, and my understanding is maybe you can't claim forgiveness for the PPP loan if you're also claiming the credit for the same time period. So you've got to kind of think about which one you want. And I would suggest that anybody who's interested in looking into this, talk to your accountant about it or your payroll company. They would certainly know something about it. There's more to it than what I described. There's, as always, there's things that need to be thought about carefully. But the basic idea being that here's another pile of money, may as well see whether you qualify.
Jay, have you looked into this at all?
You just gave me a headache. I believe we've got the credit.
The biggest change that happened relatively recently was that the eligibility was opened up for the 3rd and 4th quarters of this year. So you've got quarters that haven't arrived yet, and you can actually ask for the credit in advance for a quarter when you anticipate being down in revenues and get a check from the government. You apply for the upcoming quarter, and they'll send you money. I know somebody who did this and got $2.6 million for his payroll because their construction industries and the material problems have really delayed all their projects, and they're going to suffer poorer revenues because of that. And here's this thing, they don't ask you why your revenues are down. It's just, are they down? And if they are, then there you go. You may as well take a look at it.
And you get an actual check for the money as opposed to waiting until you pay the taxes?
There's 2 different ways. You can wait and pay the taxes, take a credit, or you can apply for the credit in advance and get a check. That's my understanding.
All right, do not try this at home. This is not to be perceived as legal or accounting advice. Please speak to your accounting professional and legal professionals.
Yes, I think speaking to the accountants and the payroll guys is critical. And but it exists, it's real, and I do know people who've received substantial amounts of money through this.
Paul, one thing, if I can try to clarify, I wasn't sure what you were saying in response to the point about whether you can claim both the PPP and the credit for the same period with the same employees. My understanding was that initially you couldn't, but it was changed so that you could.
I believe that you're right, that it is now possible to get both, but I would not claim. I was just looking in this link that I was going to send you for the language about it. But this is going to be the kind of thing that your accountant needs to answer. And I don't really want to say yes or no, but I think you're right that they removed some of the restrictions on claiming both of them, and it's now easier to do that.
The larger point is it's gotten easier to claim, and yet very few people know about this.
Right. And it's a substantial amount of money. And it could make a real difference in terms of a business that's undercapitalized or struggling because of loss of revenue.
And so people understand how much money could possibly be at stake here. How do you get to 300,000?
The basic calculation, and there are complexities that might change these numbers, but they're giving you a 70% credit on the first $10,000 of payroll per eligible employee per quarter. So that if you qualified for all 4 quarters and all of your employees, it would be $28,000 per employee as a refundable credit.
All right. Let's make the rest of this conversation an accounting and IRS 3 conversation. But Paul, thank you for raising that. Jay, you going to look into it?
Yeah, I'm on it. I put it on my to-do list.
Yep, I've already Googled it, emailed the information link to my accountant, bookkeeper, financial manager. So we'll talk about it in our meeting on Monday.
Excellent. Dana, how you doing?
I'm hanging in there. I'm hanging in there. I'm excited to be headed to Texas and North Carolina this week.
Wow.
Headed there to go do some site visits.
Ah, that's exciting.
It is. I'm looking forward to it. They're looking forward to having me. It's a great opportunity.
These are site visits on military bases, as you've been telling us about the last few weeks, right?
Yes, site visits on military bases. I'm excited. I've took Diana's advice and went ahead and set up some calls with some investment bankers. And I had my first one yesterday. It was quite jarring.
How so?
Well, it's part of the reason why I haven't, submerged myself in this world. They're a very numbers driven, and they're not completely wrong, but they're very numbers driven. And so their numbers are a lot higher than where we are or where some brick and mortar businesses will be. So, they're in the startup world, and they're in the rounds of funding in the seed world. And when you've got people making it to $1 billion companies in 5 years, or, $500 million companies in 3 years, or even $50 million companies in 5 years, that's where they're used to playing. I got off the phone yesterday and I was a little off balance. It's not because he told me anything wrong. It's just that he had his lane of looking at what he was looking at. And in short, it was a matter of, listen, you only have one location. Yes, you were right to close your first one, but until you have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 locations, this is, maybe franchising shouldn't have been what you chose. That's in short. And so I asked him, the people that he knows, he's a franchisee of a location and he knows friends that are about to be franchisors. And I asked him, how did they get to, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 locations? And he said, oh, friends and family. And so, yeah, that's just, $300,000 per location. It's not something that I could go to friends and family with. And he said, well, it's not friends and family, really. It's people who know friends and family. And that's just not my community. And so that's why I chose to franchise, because waiting until you found the friends and family's dollar to build out 5 locations just would have taken me years. It took me 8 years to get to this point. So that was it. I've got some other calls coming up.
Was he not interested in the conversation about the potential contract from the military?
He said that's your best bet, but it's a fishbowl. And that's not going to necessarily be reflective as to what would happen in the private sector. And again, I don't disagree with him. I just was a little discouraged getting off the phone as to the viability of the franchise option because he was saying that it's not a viable franchise. Similar to what Diana's husband was saying, which was, why would somebody invest in that? And I just think that there's a privilege and there's a perspective that is limited by people who have the money to make these decisions. Because there's a lot they don't know. And it's hard when you're saying, you don't know. And they're like, well, what do you mean you don't know? You're not $1 billion company. What do you mean? You're not a, $50 million company. Of course I know. Because if you were viable, you'd be at these numbers. And it's like, okay. You just say, okay.
It sounds like you brought your fund back.
No, actually, he gave me a very healthy perspective. I wasn't like, oh, this is bad. It just, what's done is done. Again, it is what it is. Deal with it. I know I've made the best decision for me at the time I made it. And fuck you. Like, I mean, I don't mean to say that to him he wasn't a bad guy. And
to be fair to him, he's given you honest input. He could
exactly.
have, good for him. He's being honest with you and he's telling you what he thinks. Good for him.
Mm-hmm. Good for him. I appreciate it. It wasn't, oh no, I shouldn't have done it. But, he's not here and he doesn't know, right? And he even, admitted to that, that there may be some things I don't know. But I think when we're talking in the investment banking world, they look a certain way. They look at things a certain way. And unless I'm coming with numbers of, high millions or high single digit millions or high double digit millions, I'm not really going to be of any interest.
Can I make a comment here? In my Vistage group, we've had a number of business owners who went through a process of talking to investment bankers to look at capital infusions. And the takeaway we took as a group was that the world of investment bankers is specialized. So that when you say, oh, I called an investment banker, you called one investment banker. And that there's capital sources that specialize in the launch phase, sort of like where you are. And there's capital sources that specialize in the $10 to $50 million, another one in the 50 to 150. They're all specialized. And if you happen to call a guy who is not doing what you're doing, don't necessarily take his dismissal of your project as dismissal of the project. It's like he's really saying, this is not what we do. And there are people who are looking for those early opportunities, and you just haven't found them yet. So I think that the move is to continue to ask around. And it may be that you need an angel type investor at this point rather than a real investment banking shop, because you are at this takeoff point. And the right person may understand it, and a lot of people won't understand it.
She paid the consulting firm that does franchises, and the question is, how much can you trust their judgment of, they told her, you can do this. They took her money, they put the stuff together, and they gave her a budget for, okay, here's what it's going to cost to market this to go find your customers. And the question is, are they right? You left the part out that I think is critical. He did qualify it. Didn't he say to you, listen, I might just be a dumb white guy? He said that, right?
He said there may be some things I don't know.
But he doesn't understand black hair care and the black hair care lifestyle and the whole thing. I don't know that he spent that much time thinking about it. I've been on this podcast with you so many times. I have a very thorough understanding of that opportunity. So just the fact that your numbers don't, blow off, page and, oh my God, this is unbelievable. You have to understand that what this market is. And I don't know that he put that much energy into thinking about it.
To Paul's point, that's who Goldman Sachs is putting me in touch with, early stage investors. I'm fairly competent on the stages of funding, and I've read up on, having your data room and just this whole entire process. So the people that they're putting me in touch with are people who not only are funding early stage businesses, but are funding, minority women businesses that cater to minority women. So, but here's the thing, they're products. And so that is also different because you're looking for someone who's in Target. I don't have products, so I'm a service. So it's just, being in this space where when you're one of the first to do things, maybe it'd be easier if I had a burger joint. Maybe not. Maybe it'd be easier if I had a Wingstop or something that was more familiar. So people are like, oh, I know how this goes. But yesterday's conversation just allowed me to have a different perspective, and will continue to bounce his feedback off of other people to hear what, they said. I have already, and several people disagree with him. They're like, oh, he just doesn't know. And I said, oh, okay. yeah, he feels that, I'd have a stronger position franchising. He was very skeptical about me only having the one, maybe two locations. He felt I should have a lot more.
Listen, there's no question you'd be better off if you had 5 locations going. But to your point, that would take you quite a while to pull off. And I said you in the first day, I said, I won't be surprised if you become a zillionaire from this, or I won't be surprised if in 2 years you think, oh my God, what did I get myself into? And I don't think this is a black and white decision. It's a case of, it's nuanced. There's an opportunity there. You don't have a lot of locations. So I don't think anyone can definitively sit there and say, oh, this is absolutely the greatest idea ever or a terrible idea. That's what you're figuring out.
The decision's been made. I mean, you've chosen to go down that path. I'm curious, Dana, you're kind of operating on 2 tracks now. One, franchising, the other company-owned stores potentially on military bases. Are you concerned at all about your energy and time being divided between those 2 tracks?
No. If there were a lot of missing pieces, if there were a lot of things left to be done, I would be, oh man, I can't. I still have to develop in this area. I think both of the opportunities will allow me time to, how should I say it? They'll allow me time to grow in them. So if I were scrambling to put our processes together, if I were scrambling on the business stuff, yes, it would be a lot. But a lot of this is going to be plug and play. I know there is a technological component that we're going to be developing that needs, that I'll have to, get acquainted with. But that's not going to take long because I'm a part of the development process.
Well, to be clear, though, you haven't really you got all the paperwork done and all the structure put together for the franchise. You could put that on hold for 6 months while you do this other thing. It's not like it's already going and you've got a trade show set up and you've already got people looking at. You could, correct me if I'm wrong, you could just say, all right, I'm putting the franchise thing on hold until I get this military base thing figured out. Isn't that true?
Sure thing. Yep, that's true.
Yeah. So you're at a good place. You can take you've got it worked out and you can just go put your focus into that for a little while.
I can develop it and then wait to market it.
You are going to learn a lot more in a very short period of time, and we'll continue this conversation.
Yep.
What's going on with you, Jay?
Well, I'm interviewing another CFO candidate today that sounds promising. I'm very confident I will find someone that fits well. My CFO is giving me plenty of time. He's not leaving until the end of the year. So that's what I'm spending my time on. And the COVID thing is back to being challenging. Like overnight, everybody's wearing masks again.
I assume you're referring to your employees. Did they do?
No, everybody. The city of Chicago said you got to wear a mask indoors. So overnight, it went from nothing to all of a sudden overnight. So we're doing it. And I can't take off the table that it's possible. There's going to come a day that I might have to make the extremely difficult decision. Do I tell people you have to get a shot, which I'm extremely uncomfortable with. And I've got some really solid long-term employees that work for me. And there's no win in this. There's no good answer to this.
You have some very solid long-term employees that have not been vaccinated?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm really uncomfortable grilling them. And I asked one of them, any chance you're going to get the vaccine? He goes, no. And, that was that. The other one I haven't talked to yet. I'm not going to start getting into a debate with them. I was hoping this was going away fairly quickly and I wouldn't have to deal with it, but I don't know what's coming now. I mean, if you watch the news, it's not encouraging. I'm thinking of not watching the news. That's one solution.
Did you see people are trying to use incentives? Vanguard Group is paying everybody who gets vaccinated, whether they've already done it or they're about to do it, $1,000.
I philosophically have a huge problem with that, for God's sakes. We're supposed to go pay people to do something to help themselves. And in my case, that would be 130. I have 130 employees. I'm going to go write a check for $130,000 so they can go do what they should do to take care of their own health. I just philosophically find that to be just, I don't even have a word for it. It doesn't seem right to me. Like, be grown-ups. If it's a good idea, go do it.
Yeah, but that still leaves you with a difficult situation.
I know. I say there's no good solution to this.
How are you thinking about it, Paul?
Oh, my God. Well, we settled on if you are vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask in the shop. And if you aren't, you do. And that's the policy I'm sticking with. Now, we're not public facing, so that makes it considerably simpler. I have 2 employees who told me they weren't going to get vaccinated, and they're wearing their masks. So in our area, the masks have started to pop up again when you go out in public, but it's not anywhere near the level of compliance that we saw last year. So I think that people are sick of it, and there's going to be a diminishing respect for whatever new rules come out of the government. People are just going to start ignoring it. I mean, how many people drive 55 miles an hour?
Well, I think it's a combination of sick of it and they have had the shots, so they feel a little protected. So it's different.
And I traveled through from Philadelphia to Nashville and back last week. And I got to say, in the South, nobody's wearing masks. And if you do, they laugh at you. So I don't know how effective all this is going to be.
The tragedy for this are the hospital workers that are putting their lives at risk for people who didn't get shots, and now they're putting their lives at risk taking care of these people. That's the tragedy. It's
a tragedy, but the people who I encountered in various places, rest stops and gas stations and restaurants and in Nashville, they didn't care. They just don't care. That's I think that's pretty much how America's going to go. We're going to learn to live with it, even if it's painful.
Dana, is this an issue for you?
No, most of, if not all of my staff are vaccinated and they're wearing masks. We've asked them to wear masks regardless because we don't know if our customers are vaccinated or not. We're not going to ask. That's their personal, private business. They asked me how I felt about it as an owner, and I said, I believe vaccination is your personal choice. I understand, but I don't agree if you don't want to get vaccinated. But if you don't, wear your mask, and it's just required. Everybody's on the floor wearing masks for themselves and for our customers.
Jay, you had an interesting experience recently with some salaries in your shop being inadvertently disclosed.
Someone sent out a report with, cost of goods sold on it and just labor cost, and inadvertently on there was 3 people's salaries, and there's disparity between the 3 salaries, which I feel comfortable about personally. I try to pay people the right amount, and it kind of blew up and people are upset, and it brings up the whole issue of, should you just post everybody's salary on the wall? And I don't believe so. And you find yourself having conversations with people what they think somebody else should make. And well, if they're making that, why aren't I making that? And it's just it's unfortunate. And I believe I've got it all calmed down, but it puts the boss in a funny position. It puts the employee in a funny position, and the employee, the argument of I should make more money because I just found out Lauren makes more money than me. If it was the exact same job, fair enough, but it's not the exact same job. And I've never had it at this level because this never happened. But I remember I was at a seminar years ago where this consultant did a speech. This is 30 years ago. And she said, you should be able to post everybody's salary on the wall. It wouldn't be a problem. And I said, are you serious? I've got factory workers making X dollars an hour, and then I've got salespeople making 50% more. Well, maybe that'll encourage the factory workers to go to college and become salespeople. I thought they're trying to put food on their table, and I was just blown away. And then my wife told me later, 'cause she happened to be there with me, she goes, I saw that woman out in the hallway. She was crying. Like, I made her cry, and oops. I'm so disgusted at people that don't own businesses. If you own a business and you've done that and it's worked out great, more power to you. Go out there and tell everybody how well that worked. But don't give me this theoretical concept that in many cases does not work. I'm sure in some cases it works very well, but it doesn't work in some cases at all. So
I was sharing that I was a labor organizer in my past life. And that's the example of when it works, when you get less guff from staff, because it's very clear from day one, here are the salary ranges for, framer A, here's the salary ranges for framer B, here's the salary range for framer C, all of which are based on the following: time in, experience, education, and the like. And so that's where, when we were negotiating contracts, that's where we would say, okay, now that we've got this salary structure in place, let's put it out there so we're not having any questions about why does this person make more than me, because it's not a secret.
Well, how big is that range? Okay, but you just said salary ranges. Walk me through, how big is that range?
It depends on the company. It could be $10,000. So, let's say hypothetically in company A, framer position A is your entry-level framer. Well, everybody who's a framer A knows that they're going to make anywhere between $50,000 and $60,000. It depends on how you structure it or put it out, but they know.
Okay, so let's walk through this. So framer A is making 50, and they look on this chart they found that's up on the wall, and it says someone else is making 60, and they go, wait a second. I framed more pictures last week than they did. Why is she making $10,000 more than me? That's ridiculous.
Because you've communicated that it's not about your output. It could be output. It could be performance based. It could be, but we've recommended make it on things that are tangible. Years in education.
Okay, and in the real world that I'm living in, when you tell the person, well, so-and-so's making more because they're really gifted at, they write great ad copy and they're in charge of the advertising for this, and then the person can go, oh, well, I do too. I'm good at that too.
Oh, okay. And so I've dealt with this in my labor background. You are? Well, we'll reevaluate it when you're given the opportunity to write great ad copy for us. We'll keep you in mind.
We're running short on time, and I want to get Paul into this. Paul, you've told us that you put your own salary up on the wall. Do your employees know what the other employees are making?
Not because I've told them. I think it's a minefield, and I've never wanted to drag the company into it personally. I would not be surprised if some of the staff have talked to each other about what they're making. But I think part of it is that a lot of times there's a disparity in the pay, the hourly pay for some of my employees that is evened out by the cost of the benefits. So if someone wants to have a conversation with me about compensation, I'm happy to do it. And when I tell them how much their health insurance costs the company, they're often quite surprised. And, it can be a number of dollars per hour. And in one case, it's almost $10 per hour for this worker. And so that affects their hourly wage because, we're providing the compensation in a different way. Now, health insurance is like the worst possible way to get compensation because everybody hates having to pay for it and you hope to God you never use it. But I still got to pay for it. So we do have a couple of positions where the basics of the salary are known. The two salespeople are pretty clear on what the other one is making because they can see it. That part of the system of monitoring the commissions is that they can see the income. But short answer is no, I would not announce what everybody is getting paid.
Minefield's a good phrase. And salespeople, pretty simple. They've got a base plus a commission. Okay, everyone knows if you sell more, you make more. That's one of the easier ones. It's the other jobs that are softer that, one person is always helpful and has given you some great insight and is a pleasure to work with, and the other person is not so much. I mean, it's just...
But you can't, that's very personal. And that's why staff get upset because, like you said, this person's a pleasant person. Whether they're pleasant or not shouldn't depend on how they're compensated. The other thing is, it's not a matter. But in the other thing is, we're not saying to the letter, put up what people make. I said it's a range. And so they understand. But I think the minefield is paying people based on whether you like them or not.
That's hardly what I'm saying. I'm suggesting there's 10 criteria as to why someone makes what they're making. If someone's unpleasant to work, if someone's less pleasant and one person's easier to work with, yes, I just as soon make sure that person hangs around.
Who determines whether that's...
Their manager. That's how it works in the real world. Their manager.
But that's part of the problem. If you're saying the manager finds this person pleasant to work with, that shouldn't be a criteria for pay because that's what determines whether I like you or not. It doesn't matter. If I'm doing my job...
Being pleasant to work with is a job criteria. It makes it easier to manage them them and requires less time to manage them. That is absolutely not the whole. That is a criteria. I'm not suggesting everyone gets paid on whether they're pleasant or not. I'm saying there are 10 different issues about some people need a lot of management and some people don't need any management. So the person who doesn't need any management is probably going to make more because they're worth more, because I don't have to spend any resources to manage that person. Other people that require a lot of management, that takes up resources. They're going to make less money. And it works out because if someone's going to quit, I just assume they be the one to quit than the one who's great.
But you just made a very important difference. Management level of involvement in your job is very different than pleasant to work with, right? Pleasant to work with is, I like you, we get along, it's easy to work with you.
Okay, we could argue what pleasant means all day long. Like I said, there's 10 different criteria. Do they take initiative? Are they the one that comes in early to get the job done? Are they the one that always stays late? Are they the one that picks up the slack? Are they the one that comes up with some good ideas? Are they the ones that customers call you once in a while and go, I just have to tell you, Dana is the greatest person I've ever done business with. I just want to thank you for that, blah, blah. There's 10 different reasons as to why somebody could be worth more money to a company. And it's just not as black and white as putting it on the wall going, okay, all of you that do this, you're going to make that. And all of you do that's going to make that. It's just not that simple.
Jay, let me ask you this. In the situation you described with the 3 workers whose salaries were disclosed and it caused some
consternation,
how did it end up in the end with them knowing what each other was paid and you explaining to them why? Are you in a better place or a worse place?
I would say that we're in a good place because at the end of the day, these are 3 very important employees that have been with me a long time that I have a very deep relationship with, and we got to a good place. And I had little to do with this because I'm not their direct manager. One of them took the time when I went in the area, pulled me to the side and said, I just want you to know we're okay. How lovely is that? That's about as lovely as you can get. We're good. We figured it out, but it just was something I would have rather have avoided. It wasn't a great thing, but everybody's good and we're forging on because it's about building a relationship. And if you have a good relationship, you can withstand some bumps along the road.
All right. Now, I just want to do one more thing, which is I got a really interesting email from a listener the other day who reacted to something you said, Jay, a couple weeks ago. This listener, Jacob Kelly from American Gunsmith, heard you talking about how you had so many people making appointments for job interviews and then blowing them off, not showing up. And he wrote to say that he'd had a similar experience. We've noticed a dramatic percentage increase in no-shows for all positions we are talking to hire for. And he came to the conclusion that it may be a number of factors, but one is the unemployment payments, that because states are requiring people to look for jobs again, people are making these appointments to prove that they're looking, but not necessarily showing up.
I think he's right. That makes sense. I think because there's something going on because literally, I'm not exaggerating, literally 20 appointments, 5 people show up. That's how bad it is. And we never had that. I think he's on to something.
I think that there may be something else at work, too, which is that people apply for a lot of jobs and then they get offered one. And then they take it. And then they're just too lazy to cancel the other appointments.
Interesting.
Because I've noticed that when we interview people now, we really need to be ready to lock them down right that second, make a decision, take them out of the job search, or they're gone. Like the idea that we could spend time thinking about it and, dragging our feet.
You know what? I'm sure you're absolutely right that that's part of it, for sure.
So someone else will hire them. I mean, it's just a different market now. We're not in 2009 anymore, and employers are going to have to make adjustments, and that's one of them. You see someone you want, like what I do is I hire them and try to get them in here, and then we'll take our time to make a decision about it. And but then we've removed them from the job market, and we have the chance to make the decision as opposed to them making the decision. And that costs money. Basically, the way you do that is by, if they're asking for 17, say, tell you what, I want to hire you right now and I'll give you 18. and you can start, whenever you can. And then if it works out, it'll be great. And if not, I'll fire you. But they respect the honesty and they understand what's going on. And they got to make a decision. If they've been identified as someone who's worth more than they think they are, and then I got a chance to do whatever I want with them. And I have had people who we let go fairly quickly after hiring them because they didn't turn out to be a good fit. But then there's others that were even better, and I was glad that I didn't let them walk out the door at that interview and go get hired somewhere else, because someone else would hire them.
But do you actually say to them, if it doesn't work out, I'll fire you?
Yeah. A lot of people actually appreciate a company which is clear about its standards. Now, I have a whole list of what we call the new employee guidelines that say, okay, here's what you're expected to achieve. Do you show up on time? Here's a whole bunch of things. If you can answer yes to all these questions after 3 weeks, great. And if you can't, then don't take this job, because these are the rules of the game you're playing. It's not that hard to succeed. Do a good job and show up and be a good teammate, and you're in.
Do they need to be pleasant?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
that's
good.
one of our criterion is, do you get along with the rest of the team?
Yes.
If you're an awful person, no, we don't want you.
All right, let me just say we had some technical difficulties today on my end, and you guys were all incredibly patient and pleasant with me, and I appreciate that. My thanks to Paul Downs, Jay Goltz, and Dana White. You guys are great. Thanks for sharing. Wait. Don't leave yet. If you have a question or a comment that you'd like the 21 Hats owners to address, send it to me by replying to your morning report or by email at lauren@21hats.com. That's LOREN@21hats.com. Do it now before you forget. And don't be afraid to tell Jay what you really think. He can take it. And if you got something out of this conversation, help us reach more business owners. Tell a friend. Subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to the Morning Report at 21hats.com. This episode was produced by Jess Thuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Okay, now you can leave. Thanks for listening, everyone.